This two-part essay was written by Mario V. Melendez entitled "The Democrat Party is Anti-Science on Fetal Pain." This is Part 1, written on December 25, 2021, in reaction to Associate Justice Sonia Sotomayor's ill-informed comments about fetal pain during the Supreme Court oral arguments for Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, the landmark case that overturned a very dubious 50-year-old precedent, Roe v. Wade. Here goes. Today is Christmas. I couldn't have timed this post about abortion better than today. One can't talk about it, yet ignore the very real issue of fetal pain. But I'm posting it just now, hoping it's too late in the night to trigger a heated discussion over Christmas dinner. I should have done the same with a post of mine on climate change, which I mistakenly posted too early last Thanksgiving Day. I apologize if that post somehow ruined your Thanksgiving dinner, because it was read and made an issue by a liberal around the table who likes virtue-signalling inclusivity meant only inclusivity with respect to colour, race, gender, and other such shallow criteria, not inclusivity with respect to ideas. This day, 2021 years ago, a baby was born in a manger in Bethlehem to a poor young mother. So the story goes. It's the history of Christendom, the builder of Western civilization. But among many in the Democrat Party these days, they couldn't care less about any of that. In fact, Christmas, Christianity, and Western civilization are somehow dirty words to them. Now you know why they would rather greet you with Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. But this isn't a post about history or religion, both of which many Democrats have a problem with, incidentally. It's not even about the ongoing culture war. Those aspects of abortion I already tackled in another post in 2018 entitled "The Curse of 60 Million Murdered Americans," about a real genocide that Democrats ignore even as it is currently raging in their and our midst. This post is purely about science, another area Democrats also have a problem with, despite their delusional talking points that the Democrat Party is the party of science. Quote, unquote, nothing could be further from the truth. This post is about fetal science in particular, according to which a fetus at 12 weeks gestation, or maybe even earlier, can feel pain. To the protestations of Democrats, science be damned. True to form as a card-carrying liberal, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor pejoratively declared during oral arguments recently for Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, a case that seriously threatens Roe v. Wade, that fetal science is fringe science. Not only are those fighting words, they're also grossly ignorant words, fit only for a typical Democrat who knows diddly squat about science. Someone should remind Sotomayor that the Earth is round, not flat, and that it revolves around the sun, not the other way around, were once considered fringe science, and that, in fact, those we consider today as settled science started as fringe science, even heresy. Just like with climate change and the China virus, by the way, I am a conscientious objector to. Calling it COVID-19, fetal pain is not for politicians and ideologues to debate about, but the morality of it is. There, I have a ton to say, but I'll save it for when I get to the part of this series about the Democrat Party being anti-ethics too. Since this post is purely on the science of fetal pain, I'll be quoting scientists who specialize in that branch of medicine. Not easy reading, but I've read a lot by them and tried to comprehend them as much as a layman can. I wish Justice Sotomayor did too, so she'd be better informed. In fact, she didn't stop at practically dismissing those serious scientists as quacks. She said more. Quote, "Yet the literature is filled with episodes of people who are completely and utterly brain-dead responding to stimuli. There's about 40% of dead people who, if you touch their feet, the Foot will recoil. There are spontaneous acts by dead brain people, so I don't think that a response by a fetus necessarily proves that there's a sensation of pain or that there's consciousness." Unquote. To her likening a fetus to the brain dead, I reacted strongly, a non-scientist. To a non-scientist, in a post where I angrily called her the Bride of Gosnell. In case you've forgotten, Dr. Kermit Gosnell is the prolific abortionist and monster who murdered babies, that somehow survived his botched abortion and is now languishing in prison for life since 2013. Even as a humble layman, I know instinctively that there's a world of difference between a brain that is shut down at the end of life as opposed to a brain that's furiously developing in a human being at the beginning of life. But let's hear it from an actual scientist, Grazi Pozo Christie, MD, who had this reaction, quote, "In fact, brain-dead people do not recoil from painful stimuli as living people do. One of the ways we diagnose brain death is by documenting the loss of response to pain. You could amputate a brain-dead person's limb with no response at all. Some extremely specific spinal reflexes persist in brain death while the patient remains on cardiac and respiratory support. But there is simply no recoil to touch in brain death." Unquote. Since Sotomayor was going to go there, you'd think she would at least do her homework first and educate herself on fetal pain, right? She obviously didn't. Well, I did, and that's in 2018 before I wrote the above-mentioned post, "The Curse of 60 Million Murdered Americans," linked on screen by a QR code. Then, just this year, even before Sotomayor likened a fetus to a corpse, the American College of Pediatricians website published a scientific paper on fetal pain that validated my 2018 post. I'll spare you the body of that scientific article that tackles the pain and/or nociception a fetus is capable of, and I'll just quote in full its abstract and then its conclusion. For the benefit of, as laymen, nociception refers to neural encoding of impending, or actual tissue damage, that is noxious stimulation, while pain refers to the subjective experience of actual or impending harm, according to PAIN, the Journal of the International Study for the Study of Pain. Here's the abstract, quote, "The American College of Pediatricians, ACPEDs, maintains that it is unethical to intentionally harm an innocent human being even in the absence of the individual's ability to perceive pain. However, in this paper, ACPDs reviews the laboratory and clinical evidence, which indicates that as early as 12 weeks gestation, and possibly earlier, exposure to noxious stimuli negatively affects immature human beings. Because of the resulting acute stress responses and subsequent potential long-term negative effects, the ACPEs holds that avoiding, mitigating and directly treating fetal, neonatal and pediatric pain is a medical and ethical obligation." Unquote. Here's the conclusion. It's 4 paragraphs long, so please bear with me. Here we go. Quote, "It is unethical to intentionally harm an innocent human being, irrespective of the individual's ability to perceive pain. However, a large body of scientific evidence demonstrates that painful or noxious stimulation adversely affects immature human beings both before and after birth. This paper highlights both where the standard of care for pain management in this population once was, where it is now, and the evidence behind the changes. Natural law ethics are not addressed here, nor are the related political and legal rights of humans before and after birth. This paper specifically presents the scientific data that has resulted in dramatic medical practice improvements in neonatal and pediatric pain management. That medical practice significantly changed despite these ongoing political legal and ethical disputes only illustrates the strength of this data. Regarding specifically pain capability during intrauterine life, Derbyshire and Bachman note, whether there was ever consensus, it is now clear that the consensus is no longer tenable. The International Association for the Study of Pain's definition of pain is too narrow, specifically because even without conscious awareness, especially in fetuses, noxious stimuli may have adverse effects on the developing individual, regardless of the quality of the level of processing in the brain. The likelihood of noxious stimulation-induced changes in developing human beings cannot be ethically ignored. In Anand's 1987 landmark publication, the authors acknowledged the difference between nociceptive activity and pain's strong emotional associations, but also immediately noted that belabouring this point had already obscured the mounting evidence that nociception is important in the biology of the neonate. Informed by the evidence, ACPDs advocates the need for in utero, neonatal and pediatric pain prevention, mitigation and treatment. Medicine's double standard of acknowledging pain capability in wanted premature babies while denying it in unwanted unborn babies of the same gestational age is unconscionable. That's the end of that conclusion of that scientific paper published in the American College of Pediatricians website and principally authored by Robin Pierucci, MD, a practicing neonatologist, fetal pain researcher and medical school professor, with her sources appearing in 30 footnotes. So rigorously researched, it doesn't at all look like it's written by a quack doctor like what Justice Sotomayor wants us to believe. If that finding by Dr. Pierucci and her fellow fetal scientists is still too complicated for the likes of Justice Sotomayor to comprehend, let me simplify it. It's unethical to intentionally harm a fetus because all noxious stimuli, irrespective of the fetus' ability to emotionally perceive pain, will do harm on that developing human being. That squarely brings to mind the Hippocratic oath of physicians of do no harm, doesn't it? Now we know the ethical imperative for anesthesia for intrauterine surgery. If done without anesthesia is unethical, how much more unethical is it to violently cut up and butcher a fetus? So, who to believe on fetal pain between a lawyer, even if she's a Supreme Court justice, and fetal pain? Scientists like Grazie Pozzo Christi and Professor Pierucci, the choice is obviously a no-brainer. Before continuing with this post, since today is Christmas, and I don't care if the word Christmas is offensive to many in the Democrat Party, I'd like to greet one and all a very Merry Christmas. End of part 1 of a 2-part essay written by Mario V. Melendez on December 25, 2021. For part 2, written on New Year's Day 2022, click on the link on screen.